Hey guys, what's up? Greetings. Aloha. So today we're going to talk about John Legend and some bad vocal habits that he has, and why you shouldn't sing like him because of those habits. He has some things that get in his way so that he gets so tired he can't even do a 15-minute concert without cracking or squeaking or getting vocally weak and tired. The main habits that I noticed that are getting in his way are style. He likes to add style. He's got this signature sound with this raspy quality to it, but sometimes that gets in his way and causes his voice to crack. When he has to sing higher notes, he relies on this kind of nasal quality to reach those notes as opposed to digging down into the breath, and that's because 3, the breath is not as deep and relaxed as it could be. So our first example is a Tiny Desk concert from 2013, and you're gonna see some raspy qualities in his voice. You're gonna hear a really big voice crack, and you're gonna see how he tries to adjust because it's live, how he tries to adjust in the moment to make his voice not crack again. So let's start with that raspy quality. We're gonna check it out and see what we got here.
I knew right from the start, oh, I was never sure of a God before, but I know he must exist. He created this.
Okay, so you can already hear it sounds like he has phlegm on his cords, like he just ate some yogurt, or he might be sick. I don't really know what's going on, but it sounds raspy.
It's ringing in my head for you. My head's underwater, but I'm breathing fine.
Alright, so the most obvious thing here is the voice crack. Yeah, that sucks because he's live and you know he's got a ton of people watching him because it's John Legend. So what do you do when your voice cracks because you've been either overusing it or using it improperly? Well, just what he did there. He tried to switch his resonance to be a little deeper, a little fuller, a little richer. He dropped that larynx down into what feels like a yawn. Huh? Let's take another look and see how it changed the sound from the crack and what happened before the crack. Immature. And what he did afterwards, how it gets so much richer and deeper. Yeah.
Blues, I can't stop singing. It's ringing in my head for you. My head's underwater, but I'm breathing fine. You're crazy and I'm out of my mind.
Okay, so first of all, he let it drop from that lifted place that he was living with before into this much richer, deep place. And then he backed off the next phrases just a little bit because he wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to crack again. And at this point, he's nearing the end of the concert. Yeah, you don't want that to happen again. It's live. So when he made that adjustment, it didn't sound like a different voice. It didn't sound like anything but John Legend. It just sounded a little bit maybe easier on his voice. Yeah, and so he could have trusted the fact that his voice was enough. That before, when he was adding all that style, clearly it wasn't a good tool to use. It didn't lead him into a place where he could sing healthily for a good amount of time, and then he cracked, and then all of a sudden he had to switch into this lower, deeper, fuller place, easier place. It sounded great. It sounded maybe arguably better than the style he was adding on. So you guys don't have to feel like you have to add flair. Trust that your voice is enough, that you can find freedom in there. So our next video is going to be a pretty good example of how he uses a nasal resonance to really reach some higher notes. This is a video from 2016. So the first thing we're going to hear is that it starts in a pretty good place. The voice is pretty supported, pretty full and deep in that rich place, but then how quickly it turns to become nasal.
Let me hear you say yeah, say yeah, I'm ready to go. Oh, let me hear you say.
Okay, so you hear how it sounded like French, like he was a French dude for a second when he's saying, I'm ready to go. That's because the sound was getting stuck right here as opposed to traveling out and forward. So he started in a good place. It didn't sound like it was difficult for him to reach that note, and then all of a sudden he stopped trusting that the notes were gonna be there, and then he had to like force it out as opposed to opening up, giving it more space, more breath, and then letting the sound come out. So now let's go back and let's watch how the progression starts from pretty okay to nasal pushing to the thing he does next.
Let me hear you say yeah, say yeah, I'm ready to go. Oh, let me hear you say yeah, say yeah, I'm ready to go.
Okay, so he added a scream-like quality to that section, and I mean, to me, it just sounded like it hurts. It sounds like his vocal cords are just going to town and creating a And then you can hear how at the end, when he sings "I'm ready to go again," it's not that French sound. It's a good technique, fuller, richer, spacious sound, same notes, different, completely different sound. It sounds like a different word. And then he touches up on that falsetto at the end, and it sounds like his breath gives up. So it just is like all over the place. It feels like he knows what the good tools are and then adds on this other layer for whatever reason that might just be getting in his way of being able to sing really, really freely in a huge range that we know he has because he's incredible. So the final video we're going to watch is from 2019, earlier this year. That's this year. It's the song Preach, and we're gonna see a vocal squeak and the switching he does between good technique and then adding style, and then how his breath is getting weaker and weaker and why.
Reading, turning off my phone, 'cause it's hurting my chest. Yeah, and heaven knows I'm not helpless. But what can I do?
Yes. Okay, so that run was juicy, right? It was really good. It was really free. But before that, the heaven knows I'm not, like that can only happen if you use your vocal cords the wrong way, as opposed to giving it space. And heaven knows I'm not. You can still give it pizzazz. You can still give it some love, some juice. And the way to do that is to create a yawn space, to track that larynx down while you're singing, and create as much space as possible in your instrument. Get a nice deep breath, and then find the sound, find the tone. So instead of in heaven, like that sound, this comes straight up, and it sounds like a puberty squeak, as opposed to and heaven knows I'm not helpless. Like, you can let this be free and down and still get a little bit of style on there. So we already know he's starting with a place of too much style and then flip-flopping between style and technique. But let's see how later on in the same performance of the same song, his breathing is not as deep and relaxed as it could be, which contributes to things like that vocal squeak and that raspiness. Let's watch his shoulders while he works. And just admire this really cute jacket that he has on.
You mine. Can't see the use in me crying if I'm not even trying to make the change I wanna see. I can't sit and hope I can't.
So if you're watching his shoulders, you can tell that they come up this way, which is an indication that the breath is short and that there's some tension holding in the upper chest that might be disrupting a free airflow coming from the lower belly. So when we breathe deeply, essentially what happens is that the diaphragm pushes down on the organs in the belly, which push out, and all of that creates space for the lungs to expand, and then the opposite happens when you exhale. So when we breathe, the shoulders really shouldn't move that much. In the short version of breath, you can hear the breath, you can hear the tension. So listen. And that means that there's muscles holding tightly right around this area, upper chest, or even in the throat sometimes. And when you breathe deeply, it will make a silent breath. So if you focus on trying to make the breath silent, your body will breathe deeply. It's like you don't have to think about it too hard. So now we're gonna see what happens when you don't have as deep a breath as you could, how his breath gives up, and then he pushes a nasal sound out, and then the vibrato slows down.
Preach, baby, preach. Falling to my knees, And oh, I do believe I can't just preach, baby, preach.
Yeah, and so you heard when he flipped up, he said, fall into my... It was really weak and really soft, and I think he has a lot more power there if he would just get that full and deep breath. And the reason why we know that the breath isn't there is because then shortly after he switches into falsetto, it gets a little nasally. Preach! Which is just coming out of here as opposed to letting this drop down like we've been talking about all day. Preach, baby! And it can still have resonance, but it's just a little easier on the throat. And then the vibrato slows down because he goes, he lets the breath fall away as opposed to getting a nice big deep fuller breath. Maybe he lacks a little bit of breath stamina. I mean, we already saw his shoulders are up here, so we know he's not getting the fullest breath that he could.
Preach, baby, preach.
So you can hear how those last three little sections, he says, preach, baby, preach, and throughout those his breath is dwindling, 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 so that by the end the vibrato is slower than when he started. So to sum up, 1, style. Basically, if you lose your voice, you lose your career. So I would suggest that if you find the balance between the most free version of your voice that you can, find the richer tone, find the tone where your larynx drops down, where you have a big yawn space, where your throat is nice and open, and your breath is driving sound, find that and then add flair to make it sound more like you. I think John Legend is a really good example of having a style, but in my opinion, he uses his style a little too often, and it gets in his way and makes things harder for him. 2, the raspiness and the squeaks are a sign of vocal damage. You can check out my Adele video, Why You Shouldn't Sing Like Adele, for a little more information on a raspy quality, but here we've got a prime example of how when you sing starting with that raspy kind of phlegmy quality, it can end up making things difficult for you 5-10 minutes later in the same set, in the same performance. And number 3, the breath is everything. The sound that you make can only be as consistent as the breath you're giving it. And so with John Legend, we can see that his breath isn't always as deep as it could be. His shoulders are coming up to his ears. He's got a lot of tension in his upper chest, which is probably getting in his way. Without a full breath, without the deep breath, he has to rely on things like pushing the sound out through his nose, sounding like a French dude. And because he doesn't have a deep breath, he's cutting off his full capacity for the freest sound that could come out of his mouth. So instead of relying on little tricks like pushing the sound out through your nose or adding a raspy quality to your tone, I encourage you guys to find the freest, most open, full version of your voice and then go ahead and add some flair onto it to make it you. But as long as you know what that foundation is, you'll be good to go. You'll be singing nice and healthy, and you'll be sounding awesome. So if you guys have any questions or comments, go ahead and send those below, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Say crack again. It's a Mean Girls reference.